Well, thank you all for coming. My name is Rachel Anstatt. I am the exchange program coordinator at the George Washington University, but I'm not here as a GW employee. I'm here as a GW grad student or former grad student. So I'm going to share with you some of the key takeaways from my research. But before I dive into that, I would love to just briefly go around and have people do names and maybe if you go to an ACSI school or not, and how big your program is. That, I know you've done this a million times, but I just want to know who's here. So.
No, super valuable.
I'll start. I'm Liz Chavez. I'm the International Program Director at Northland Christian School, which is in Houston, Texas. We are not an ACSI school, and we currently have, well, this past year we had 36 students in our international program, which is roughly 20% of ours.
I'm Albert LaVoy. I'm at Christian Heritage School in Dalton, Georgia, carpet capital of the world. I have to say that. That's what they tell me. Now it's actually Soccer Town, USA. That's another story. That's the one I prefer. I'm the chaplain for the soccer team. It's always great. But anyway, I don't think we're an ACSI school. I think we're SACS. There were some changes. I'm not in on that level. But we have currently 9, and we should have 12 starting August.
My name is Naomi Payton. I'm International Program Director at Calvary Christian Academy in sunny South Florida. If anybody want to visit, come on by. We've had an international program. This will be year 12. Everything I know about building one is by coming here.
That's right.
8 times. But we had 26 last year. That was like when things kind of did the upswing after the pandemic. We're now at 20 this year, but we're covenant. We're only allowed to bring Christians. So with the US dollar being so strong in South America and Central America, it's very hard to get Christians in predominantly Christian areas that are close to Florida right there. So our numbers are low. I'm only allowed to bring 4 unchurched from different parts of the globe, only 4. And right now I'm getting them from Europe. But God is good and He's saving lives. And so I'm going to show everything.
Okay, I'm Carla Evans. I am the Director of Student Life and International Relations at Southside Christian School in Simpsonville, South Carolina. We are an ACSI school. Are we supposed to be saying that?
Yeah, we are too.
Okay. So we're an ACSI school and something else. There's a couple of other things that we're doing. What else am I supposed to be saying?
Besides of your program.
Oh, okay. So we have 20 students. And I think we're probably going to be somewhere around 20-ish, 20, maybe 24 or something for this coming school year. Yeah.
I'm Carrie Holscher. I'm not with the school currently. I'm with Fluormark, but I still like to keep my foot in the door and kind of see what's going on. So I was at Summit Christian Academy. They are an ACSI school. When I was there, we were around 24 students pre-COVID. I think they got down to as low as 1, and that was the last couple of years. They only had 1 or 2, and then they're rebuilding. So I have to check with Rocco, but I think they're up to about 7 or 8 now. They're just rebuilding after COVID. So I'm just being nosy. I just like to see what's
My name is Stephen Deck. I am not with a school either, but I am with ACSI. So I work with ACSI accreditation.
Hi, I'm Doug Carter, Dean of Residential Life at Wisconsin Lutheran High School in Milwaukee. We have about 70 international students, part of our 900 day school students, mostly in a dorm, not ACSI, but with a program about 10, 12 years old. We want to start focusing in on the quality factors and improvement.
I'm Steve Sark, International Program Director at Ben Lippin School in beautiful Columbia, South Carolina. We have a program of about 30 students, international students in a high school. We're K through 12, but our high school is about 420 total, so about 30 internationals, mostly China, and then smattering of other places.
I'm Carrie Peterson, and I'm the Spanish teacher and international
student director at North Cal Christian School in Kennesaw, Georgia,
Yeah,
which we are rivals.
absolutely.
Well, used to be, because now
Used to be,
we've
now we're separate.
pivoted regions and,
Yeah.
but I used to coach soccer, so I
Oh,
probably saw
so
you on the
you-
soccer field.
oh, okay, I knew there was something.
Yeah, something about you. We had, pre-COVID, we had 40
Wow.
international students, primarily from Asia. We really have a diverse group this past couple of years, but we had 18 last year. So I think we're doing okay considering that. Anyway,
We need this all.
we'll chat.
The rivalry is over.
Yeah, we can still be there. And we are ACSI.
Oh, I think, yeah, we are. I didn't say that.
I'm Nikki Daniels. I'm with Monte Vista Christian School in Watsonville, California, and we are an ACSI school. Pre-pandemic, we had dorms with 100 international students, and we're just around 30 for next year.
Great, well, thank you all. It's good to know who's in the room. Just to give you a little bit of a background on me, I know I've met some of you, but so my interest in international high school students started when I was in high school, actually. We had a pretty large international student program at my high school, and it was a private Christian school, ACSI school. One of those students became my really good friend, and he kind of had a lot of issues with the program, was just struggling with the transition, and it was pretty difficult. So even in high school, I was thinking, what's happening with these programs? Like, they're so powerful and impactful, but they can be really challenging too. So that's where all of this started for me. I went to Wheaton College for my undergraduate. I got a BA in psychology, and then after that, I moved to Germany and worked at Black Forest Academy, which is another ACSI school, a Christian international boarding school in Germany. And I was working full-time in residence life there for 2 years. And then the pandemic hit, and I came back to the US and started grad school. And I'm very excited to be in a room full of people who actually care about this topic. So anyway, here we go. An outline of the presentation. I'll give you a little bit of a background, just a very short portion of my literature review. We'll talk about the methodology for my research, the findings, and then I want to focus on the key takeaways, things that will be practical to all of you. All right, so I use the term international secondary student most of the time, and I just mean diploma seeking or exchange. So F1 or J1 students. I'm an ARO and a DSO, so I know a little bit, but I know some things that in practice are pretty different at the high school level. And then I'm going to be talking a lot today about ACSI's ISP endorsement. And they recently, or they're actually currently shifting to an ISP addendum. So the content is almost the same, but the language that I'm using is the endorsement because that's what I used for my research. And I just want to give a quick note about compliance language. I'm using compliance language, like did the school meet the standard or not? Yes or no, black and white. And I just want to say that's not really at all what ACSI is trying to focus on. I think they have a really healthy growth mindset and they're thinking about improvement. So just want to let you know, I don't work for ACSI. I'm kind of using the endorsement in a different way for research purposes. So for the literature review, there are not a whole lot of publications out there on international secondary students. IIE did 2 publications, one in 2017 and one in 2020. And the focus of that publication is that these students are kind of in this pipeline to US higher education. So they're kind of promoting this idea that the reason why you're getting anybody coming to your schools and doing these programs is ultimately to get them to a top university in the US. It would be interesting to know if you all think that's true in practice, but that is what these researchers are saying. There's just a handful of studies about student experiences at the secondary education level. And they're things that I'm sure all of you know very well. Things like students experience homesickness and adjustment difficulties and discrimination and mental health challenges. So these are all things that you know well. There's one dissertation in particular that I found really helpful, and that's Brown's dissertation from 2019, Robert Brown, I think. And he did a whole dissertation on homestay programs at ACSI schools. It's really great. It's a dissertation, so it's quite long, but if you're interested, it's a really interesting read. They have interviews with students. So anyway, this is the research that I found most relevant. So what is quality? I'm using ACSI's ISP endorsement standards as my definition of quality. So this is not, these are not my ideas, these are from ACSI's endorsement. So first, purpose and foundational documents. So a high quality program would have a written statement of philosophy, purpose, and then Christian distinctives, things that are specifically Christian about your program. And then the program would also align with the school's overall, the school's vision, the school's overall program goals. An excellent program would also have well-structured and is well-structured, and it would function as a cohesive and reliable program by exhibiting a pattern of focused engagement, care, accountability, and professionalism in all aspects of the program. I know that's a lot, but I love the wording there. The focus on care and accountability is really great. So, and then the final piece of this that I want to pull out for you is promotional materials. Ideally would be professional and accurate to representing the school and your program specifically. The second kind of category is the instructional program. So we want the program to be consistent with what was advertised, consistent with what domestic students are receiving. And then this is an interesting concept here, the capacity to serve. And I'm sure all of you have run into this if you work in admissions, making sure that you're only accepting students that you truly have the capacity to serve in every capacity, including English language levels in particular. And then also learning objectives that accommodate international students. I think there's even a whole session on that. So that's an important point as well. Offering ELL services for those who need it. And then training for staff, and I mean teachers and any kind of staff, anybody who's working with international students.
Is this presentation in the folder?
I did change it, but I'm going to talk to Charity,
Okay.
see if I can switch so that you get this version.
Awesome.
So these are all ACSI's ISP endorsement, and the addendum is online, so you can find it on ACSI's website. So spiritual formation as kind of the third category. So schools should primarily seek to love, welcome, and educate international students without coercively making them feel like they have to convert. And I think this is an interesting point in all of our cases, in your cases at Christian schools, because we want to make sure we're giving them opportunities without pressuring them, right? So this is a great point from ACSI here. Clearly communicating the expectations for spiritual engagement prior to their admission or arrival. So you just don't want students to be surprised that they have to attend chapel or go to church. And then accommodating non-Christian international students in Bible classes, offering culturally sensitive mentors, offering service and ministry opportunities for international students. Number 4, we have 4 and 5, so 2 left. Homestay and boarding. In this category, it's a great idea to be monitoring on a monthly basis the living situation. So if you have a homestay or a boarding program, whatever you have, making sure that you're regularly monitoring their living situation. And then the school ideally would accept responsibility to oversee homestay, boarding, and those relationships with anybody who's taking care of the international students. And then all involved in the homestay program have been thoroughly oriented and held accountable for the care and protection of international students. And finally, in this category, well-defined host family selection process. And that was different for every school, but making sure that you have one that's well-defined, consistent. And finally, support services, having an orientation and emergency plan for different types of emergencies that could happen. A defined system of how to handle reports of abuse and neglect and other concerns. Creating strategies for involvement in your school. And then finally, having a post-experience evaluation. So that was a lot, right? But what I hope you got from that is actually you're doing probably a lot, most of these maybe, in a small way or a big way, wherever you are, you're probably doing most of these things, right? So I hope that's encouraging to you. All right, so back to my research. I had two main research questions. The first one, I kind of cheated, it's technically two, but the one's kind of a follow-up. So the first research question was, how do the policies and practices of international student programs at ACSI schools compare to those endorsement standards that we just covered? And are there school characteristics that are associated with a higher level of quality? And the second question, which I won't really touch on very much, is what are the perceived barriers to pursuing that ISP endorsement? Because it was optional. For my instrument for my research, I created a survey based on those standards, and I kind of divided them into these critical indicators or critical standards, required standards. So what I mean by that is in order to get this endorsement, those components are the ones you absolutely had to have. They won't give you the endorsement without those components. But there are other components that you also have to get the endorsement. And the idea is you reach 80% or more of all of the standards combined to get the endorsement. So I'm again kind of using the endorsement in a way it's not really meant for, but for research purposes. The standards that I included in the survey were those essential or required standards, and then I also included a few more questions, mostly about support services, child protection, and training. And the participants were all of you. I actually kind of wonder if any of you got the email from me about, hey, do you want to participate in the survey? But all of the participants were ACSI accredited and SADP approved. This is just a quick example of the standard that I was looking at, and we'll look at this one, 2.2. The school only admits international students that has the capacity to serve, right? We just talked about this, especially as it relates to English language levels. So one of the two questions that I created from this was this one. Does your school have a minimum English language proficiency requirement for admission? Yes or no? So just to give you an example of how I turn the standards into a survey. All right, let's get to the findings, the fun part. 39 participants in total, and then the average number of international students per school was about 7. So, and this is in 2022, and I think this is kind of a good picture of where we are, but I would say it's probably, since this is the average, it's a little bit on the smaller side. So my participants had slightly smaller programs. And then the pie chart here is showing you the total number of high school students enrolled in the school. So you can see the green and the yellow together. It's about 60% had 150 or fewer students total in their high school. So we're kind of looking at relatively small schools, relatively small programs, but hopefully not too far off from the average. I know I lost some of you when I put up this slide, I know. Don't be scared. It's basically what we're looking at here is how do the participants measure up with those essential components, just kind of those required standards. And so what I did was I graded each response, basically. That's what this is. So highest score, obviously 100, lowest. In this case, the lowest score was about 50%. So everybody kind of fell in a nice bell curve around that. So the average score was about 76%. So that means, you know, those are the essential components. Hopefully, like everyone, if they knew about the standards and everything, would be getting 100%. but that's not bad. If you've never even seen these standards, you're answering these questions, I think 76% is not bad, but there's still some room for growth. So what are host schools doing well? 96% said that they check in with students on a regular basis, which I think is great. It shows that you're all kind of putting in the effort to make those touch points with your international students. 100% of participants said that they align with the school's vision. So they have a very clear picture of how what you're doing in your program relates to what the school wants to do as a whole. Some of the things that host schools are doing well, 97% said that they do have a specific English language requirement in order to be admitted to the school. 97% said they had a discipline policy in place, like an official policy. So there's some consistency in how they're responding to discipline issues. And then background checks, I put a star here because I put it in, what they're doing well, but it's also, background checks are required, right? So this is kind of mixed, but 92% said that they have background checks for all of their host parents. And then this one is kind of interesting, age 18 and up. So background checks for anybody in a host home that is over the age of 18. And this comes into play when you have maybe an aunt or an uncle or someone who's living in the host home long-term. Sometimes an adult child comes back to live at home for a long time. Sorry. I might be a call for an intern. Hopefully it'll come up. Good, awesome. Okay, so only 88% said that they were making sure that they asked each host family for every single person who's over the age of 18 and getting a background check on that person. So let's move to improvement areas. So one of the main ones is that a lot of programs didn't actually think through or write down what is their program's purpose, not just your school, how you fit in with the school, but really what are you doing as a program that's unique? What are your goals as a program? And then similarly, 39% said that they had Christian distinctives. And this could be because the term maybe isn't widely known outside of these standards, I'm not really sure, but 39% said that they had Christian distinctives specific to their program, things that you're giving to your international students in particular. A few more areas of improvement. Only 64% of schools said that they told international students or their families how to report abuse and neglect. This one, if you don't remember anything else from this presentation, I hope you remember this because it's so important. This is something that you can add to your orientation. You can put it in your handbook or whatever, but this is really, really important information for your students to have, just in case. And then 48% of participants said they had a mental health crisis protocol. So that means less than half of schools have a clear plan in place if there's a mental health crisis. And then this component, employees being instructed to present the gospel in a non-coercive way or a way that doesn't make students feel pressured. 41% said yes, they have instructed their employees to present the gospel without pressuring, but only 20% said that they had a written policy about this. And so this might be a case where you have things in practice, but it would be great to make it official, write it down in the policy format. So what program characteristics are associated with a higher level of quality? I ran a lot of analyses on this, and there are only 3 components, but I can share them with you. So the first one is having a bigger program, having higher international student enrollment. The second one that was associated with higher quality is having a homestay program. And the third was having a post-experience survey. And I put homestay here because I only asked that to the programs that had a homestay, but post-experience survey can be helpful. I told you I wouldn't really talk about this one much, but I just want to point out 46% said that they were not aware of the ISP endorsement. And this is interesting because they were all ACSI schools, so they all have the option to go through the process, but 46% said they didn't even know that it existed. Okay, key takeaways. So I tried to make these memorable by making them all start with P. I hope that helps. So purpose, protective practices, protocol, pressure, and pull, and we'll go through all of those. Number one, purpose. Written statements of philosophy, and I've mentioned this a couple of times, but program-specific, written down statements of philosophy and purpose, and those can help guide all of your decision-making in your program. And then if you already have that, great. If you don't have Christian distinctives, that's a great opportunity, good place to add those Christian distinctives. And then you just want to keep in mind, if you're thinking about drafting those, they should be clear and, again, program-specific. Number two, protective practices. Child protection training is pretty common in the boarding school setting. So I'm coming to you from that setting. And I was working in Germany, so they have different laws than they have in the US. And so we had really, really excellent child protection training in that setting. And it would be wonderful to see more programs host parents, not just boarding schools, adopting some of these protection, child protection practices. I have a list of resources at the very end of the presentation. I have a QR code to a list of resources. So if you're curious about that, there's a couple of resources on that list. As I mentioned before about the reporting of use and neglect, that would be something that you could add to your orientation. In your handbook, you could include reporting contact info for students. There are also some great resources for caregivers of teens who are going through difficult times. So these are all great resources that you could add to your handbook or your orientation.
Rachel, I would add that, you know, a lot of times we're getting away with things that folks working in the public sector could never do, right? Because we have certain exemptions that we're allowed because of our private status. So everything about protective practices is down to the letter in those communities, in those schools. And so we really need to catch up on that.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, like I said, in Germany, it's really different. We had a lot of laws that we had to follow. But I really think it's so helpful, even just if it's not required, it's so helpful to learn about duty of care and just certain basic concepts. And I think host parents would really appreciate having vocabulary for what they're probably already doing, but it's a great component to add if you don't have it. Number three, protocol, and I'm talking about mental health crisis protocol in particular here. So we know that international students are going through this massive international transition, and that would be hard for anyone at any age, but they're also kind of typically going through this without their parents, without their typical support system. They have a support system, but it can just be really hard, as all of you have seen probably in your work. And I just want to mention, I don't know if you're all familiar with TCKs and all of that, but if you are, these international students are really in the first or maybe second step of becoming a TCK. And so there's a wealth of resources related to TCKs that would be very applicable to you. And it's awesome that Michael Pollack is here because he wrote the book on TCKs. So I'm excited about some of those opportunities for crossover between TCKs and international students. And then another thing that you can do that's very practical is just start building a resource library that's specific to your school. And you generally want to make those culturally sensitive resources, right? So telehealth is an excellent thing to tap into. It's never been this easy to access a mental health clinician that specifically meets your students' needs. I went on Psychology Today's website and they have a search tool for therapists, and I put in, you know, Christian, Mandarin speaking, certified in Virginia. And there were like 8 people that came up. And that's amazing, you know? So we have all these tools that I think it would be great to tap into. Telehealth is an excellent resource.
Can I ask about that?
Yeah.
So, what is the cost for that?
I don't know. So it depends. You can also filter for insurance on Psychology Today.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure, but it's going to be probably similar to what any kind of local resources that you already use.
Okay.
Yeah,
But it's done through online.
yeah. So it's therapy, but it's just virtual. And this really picked up in the pandemic. So really, you know, everybody's doing telehealth. I have a friend who's a therapist and she switched to telehealth in the pandemic. So it's really popular. Okay, number 4, pressure. So again, this is that question of how do we give international students the opportunity to meet Jesus and engage spiritually without pressure. And this one can be very, very difficult to see kind of from an outsider's perspective because we're also invested, right? Like we really want the students to know Jesus, but it can really cause long-term harm to them in their spiritual growth if they feel that they've been pressured. It actually might kind of push them away. So it's a difficult thing to talk and think about, but it's important. So in line with this, consider the expectations about chapel and church and biblical integration assignments, everything that's related to their spiritual development at the school. And then just making sure that students are not surprised when they come to campus and they start experiencing these things. One of those dissertations said that there are students that they interviewed, so I think like 19% said they didn't even know they were coming to a Christian school. So yeah, I was so shocked to hear that, but you know, you want to make sure that we're communicating everything prior to admission. And finally, poll. So a survey. This is something you can set up. We can do a survey on Google Forms, I guess it is, in like 15 minutes. Just come up with some questions that you need feedback on. If you're struggling with how to create a survey that works for your program, it's a great idea to list all of your program aspects. And then you want to ask questions on each aspect that you came up with. Another good way to expand on surveys, if you already are doing some, make a list of stakeholders. Think through truly who is every single person who is interacting with international students. If you only have a survey for students, maybe you want to branch out and ask teachers some questions, or you want to ask host parents some questions. So making a list of stakeholders can help. And then finally, I recommend using ACSI's addendum. So now it's not an endorsement anymore, but an addendum as a template. Everyone can do what I did when I created the survey. You can do it yourself. And then in conclusion, quality matters, right? Especially when you're rebuilding, it can be difficult to think about quality, but it's important to keep that continuous improvement mindset, always kind of improving what you already have. And then you want to just start small. So if you want to just pick 1 or 2 things from the presentation that you thought, we could improve this, you could start with creating a survey or drafting a new policy, or starting a list of resources. And then I also created a short assessment tool. If you follow this QR code, this will take you to a Google Doc that I made of just all resources that are specifically tailored to you as ISP administrators. And my thesis is also on that list. And then the self-assessment tool, which is basically just a modified version of the survey that I use. But I hope that you found this presentation useful, and I would love to wrap up with just sharing in groups of, 2 or maybe 3 or 4. And then just talk about, brainstorm ideas. What are some things that you think you could work on in improving your program? So you can break up and do that with the rest of
What do you think?
Steve, you said.
Yeah.
Doug, nice to meet you. And you were at Ben Lippen School.
Yes, sir.
Center of the state capital, right?
Beautiful.
Yeah, I've been there, but it's 20 years ago. I hate saying things that happened in my life were that long ago. Tell me a little more about your school.
So we're a school of about 1,200 students total, 420 in the high school. Pre-pandemic, we had 60, 70 international students. Our admissions protocol requirements were much lower at that point when I came in. That's when I came into the program. So when I came in, we started to adjust that and made our admission policies a little bit more stricter. And then COVID hit, so combined all those things, we've gone from 70 down to about 30. Primarily Asian. We're primarily boarding, but we do offer homestay. We have houses on campus, boarding houses on campus. We're on the campus of Columbia International University, so we are a ministry of CIU.
Wisconsin Lutheran High School is 120 years old and added and was conceived to serve Lutheran day school students in Milwaukee. 10, 12 years ago, well, 20 years ago, we became a choice school. So we received voucher students from the city of Milwaukee and now from the state, anywhere in the state. And then 10, 12 years ago, we started the international program and then realized there's a domestic residential component that we can include in that. And I became dean of residential like 5 years ago.
No, I've been a part of
4 years ago.
Yeah, but everybody, the kids, the dog.
Had COVID the first year. And so we saddled, but now we're back up to about capacity.
How many domestic residential students do you have?
Domestic residential. So it's been a handful, 6, 7 each year, and a dorm of 72, right? And usually those are ones who have some kind of connection with our school or our church circles, right? And that's how they found the school. So I've been saying 10, 12 years. Is that kind of the par for the course where a lot of international programs are at in terms of age?
We've been around longer than that, probably around 20 years or so.
Some a little older, yeah.
Yeah, you get some that are in that 20-year mark from my experience.
Well, again, wheat, she said, I think 2007 is what they said about wheat. And,
I think SCA is around 15 now.
Yeah.
So it's kind of varies, but yeah.
Yeah, and in our circles, St. Croix Lutheran Academy in Minnesota, West St. Paul, was kind of like the flagship and the first one, and they dove in hard. They've got 150 international students in their school, or 450. And they were the ones who kind of piloted it. And one of my colleagues had worked for a dozen years at St. Croix before coming down to Milwaukee. Her husband, as a pastor, took a call, and so she came along, and now she's using those skills at our school. And they said, well, come in and bring all the things you know, but that's just it. It hasn't been written down. It's all been experiential. It's all just
anecdotal.
Yeah. And now it's time to put it down and organize it. I was telling Stephen, we're at a growth inflection point, right? We filled our dorm, and now it's okay. Do we build another one? So it's like, and my ISP director is I'm happy that he's doing this. It's just tapping the brakes and saying, wait a minute, we don't know that we're ready to do that yet. We don't know that we have capacity to serve effectively, right? So let's just slow your roll. Let's assess. So I'm really excited to hear about some of these tools.
And,
And just to apply them.
No, not at all, not at all. I'm just
we require all the families to.
saying the challenge.
Are you saying, what kind of point are you at for
Not
the value?
So it's
This kind of
background check
assessment?
and completing CPAS. And the videos are
Yeah,
amazing. They engage you.
I think it's an ongoing thing.
Yeah. You're kind of a cog in a big wheel though.
And the way it's done.
Yeah, right, you know, your situation in the school and then on in the university, it's like, there's a lot of big picture stuff going on above.
Absolutely. And honestly, I think ISPs,
Kids in there, like,
Can-
local coordinator.
maybe not necessarily, I shouldn't speak for all schools, but
Our
sometimes
local coordinators,
I
and they're the
I
ones
feel
that
like
do all this.
we've had a good history, we've got a good solid program, but even still,
There's a lot of-
ISPs
there's a lot
can
of
get
programs that don't trust.
pushed to the side. Absolutely.
Because
At least.
It comes down to, in my opinion, the fact that those parents
So.
are not here.
Yeah.
I mean, why do we have a top-notch baseball program? Why do we have a world-class robotics program?
We were. doing the
Parents
work
said,
with,
we
they were
want
doing it. So
to do this.
basically,
We're going to
right.
fund a speed and agility center just to focus on our high school football team getting faster and stronger. So we're gonna build a center just for speed and agility. Our parents are sort of invisible.
Yes.
So I think that's where we come into play to be able to advocate on behalf of the program
Right.
for the students.
Um,
Yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question.
No, sure. No, I'm sensing the burden you're carrying, you know, that it's, you see the value, right? And it's been hard for a lot of people.
Because the thing is that she
Right.
doesn't want to go to church.
And the reality is,
And that's gonna be-
international high school students are going to come to America because a certain number of parents see that as their best option to get to an
The
American
pipeline,
university
yep,
pipeline.
absolutely.
So if that's the case, I would much rather the schools, this type of a conference, be the ones who welcome them, because I feel like they will get. Although I think you made a valid point, in the public sector, there are some things where people's, their feet are held to the fire
Yep.
more closely than we are. I still feel like our private Christian schools can provide a great environment, a great situation opportunity for international students. So
That's about the
that's
mission.
why,
Yeah.
that's why I keep doing it.
We had 24 international students graduate last year. 8 of them had been baptized while they were with us.
Wow.
You know, whether that was 1 year, 4 years, you know, thank God for that spirit. You know? That's kind of where it started for us, and with our leadership, and was really, we don't have to contend with it. Our leadership is all in on it. Our leadership is shoehorning this program into our 120-year-old school. You know,
It's a mom and twin.
Right.
So many schools don't have that, and then what you're experiencing is even worse.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like sister.
So, no.
Well,
Yep, and so anything you can do to articulate, clarify the value and the opportunities, you know, the stories, right? Are you going to Kingdom Stories? Is that one of the?
Yeah, I think that was
During the
right
session?
now, yeah.
Okay. Yep, because you need more of the admin stuff, but yeah, those just communicating those things are just so huge. How long were you working at Summit?
I was there for 3 years.
Okay.
So 3 full years and then COVID.
Yeah, gotcha. Were you working with international schools before that?
But it's just.
No, so we lived overseas. We were with
And then the other speed cousin who doesn't want to move to rougher the weather.
Spirit. Well, that was our experience living cross country.
On Rocco too.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, and so that was
But it's family.
where my
When it's
international
family.
experience began. And then worked very closely with them there. And the stuff you've described is strict. This hard for me as an adult, with my family, and to manage, and all the heartbreak I went through with my got young children going through this.
Yeah.
And just trying to navigate this for them. And
Hands
that's all.
counseling.
Ooh,
Yeah.
now let me think about sending my child at 14 somewhere without me. Hard enough.
For a year.
So, yeah, and you know, that's one, so it's 3, 4
Right.
years, 5 years.
Yep.
And I was only 1 year doing this, trying to, hey, I've got a second grader. You know, or 7th and 8th graders. You know,
Yeah.
Mom and dad, now we're talking 8th grade. Although we did have a couple moms come that we allowed students to be a little bit younger. So, yeah, so that's kind of my.
Well, and that was at the earlier end of these programs, and we were all, you know, stumbling blind to figure out, okay, should we do this? How should we do this? Before we get to this point of actually assessing, are we doing a good job? What are the standards?
Going on.
And that's the thing, yeah, because all of you are so responsible.
Yeah.
To these families,
Yeah.
these students and their parents, we have such a great responsibility. But then to God.
Yeah.
To do this in a way that's gonna serve this child well.
Yeah.
Because like it or not,
Yes.
like it or not, we are taking on that big role, and so how are we gonna do that?
I need to have
Well,
things so that I can
can't do it well, then we, you know, that's
in our mission.
that's where we were like, we can't do this well over this number. And the response, we have to, so we're still here until we can do it, you know, better. And so, and I think that's where a lot of schools are. You know, it's like we wanted a certain percentage to be international of our student body, but we didn't have the support to get there. We could only do it well at this number.
Yep.
So, it's a big thing.
It's a non-negotiable.
It's a lot to consider.
No, I'm really happy that I said to you that last session, it's like, our overall school strategic direction is saying right now, let's do what's next for the international program. I don't really think we've got the tools. I don't think my director would say that he knows how to determine the markers, you know, for advancement. And I'm like, no, I think this is really gonna help with that.
I think those markers shift too. You may have to take some markers off. Your staff.
You know what I mean? So it's just this, that's a lot of integrity of the target
To some degree.
And if you don't monitor,
It works well this way now.
monitor, you don't
But
monitor.
it's a constant.
How many staff do you have in resident program
Sure.
devoted to the residency aspect?
Right.
And are they full-time
Yeah.
or do they also teachers and also doing?
So ISP has 4 full-time staff, the director, the admissions. The director does a lot of admissions too. And the admissions teaches a class or two, right? And then, but I'm all res life.
These are your lane.
One other staff is all res life. And she has supervisor
So, okay, so
duties
the agencies.
in evenings and weekends.
Yeah.
And then I've got a number of part-timers
So
or
you've met these.
full-timers who have half a supervisor job and half a teacher job. So my ideal is to have 3 men, 3 women on my supervisor staff that work part-time jobs. So
They're there in the evening.
that's how I divide by 100. Yeah, that's how I divide by 168 hours a week. Or whatever, 356, right? If you're gonna have 2 people working.
Reside in the facilities.
I lived 1 year there, but then we bought some homes because they want to build a dorm, right? So we bought some houses, and I live in one of those right now. But that could be the next dorm location. I'm just like, please not before my daughter graduates from this high school. Let's not move her out to senior. But, yeah, so that, and I feel well supported by that, right? And I've even got a couple supplementary supervisors, a sick call supervisor in the morning.
Or whatever.
after the
Family
bridge
talking
for,
about homesteading.
you know,
There's homesteading.
between the school days. All right.
You're out now?
Oh, wonderful.
Would help you find students in your price point.
Okay, do we have, are some people willing to share some things that they're thinking about adding to their program or improving?
I'll say that I love the, and I'm gonna go and look at the ACSI, you know, benchmarks and all that are there. I think it's really wonderful to already have something you can look at, to be able to take all you're already doing and just quantify, put it all together. I think it's a great pattern and so many reminders of the things that, in our case, I looked at everything that we have and we use the CVAST. I was telling these ladies, we use CVAST. It's a program that helps, it's online modules that are incredible in regards to being aware of not abusing, what is abuse, what isn't abuse, whether it's verbal or whatever. And we require all of our homestays to watch these videos and any volunteer that works at our church or school. And they're really, really good. But I think that having it written out, here's what we do to protect kids, here's the number you need to call, if this happens to you, here's, because we do take for granted that they are going to tell us, and if we don't bring it up, it could be, the gorilla in the room, and I think it's good to be able to delineate intentionally who it is you go to if there was a situation.
Yeah.
Being a person who's been in my school for so long, and I know all the people that I put together to love on them, like I know who they are, and you always choose the best, right? But truly, things happen. So it's good to do what you said, to have it out there. So that's a way that I think will improve that.
Can you name that resource again, please?
It's called CVAST, CVAST, CVAST.
Yeah, I meant to say this in the presentation, but something that I learned in residence life at the boarding school is it's a good idea to have a person who is not their usual caretaker, their usual point person. Just add that person to the list because they might talk to you, they might feel more comfortable because they know you, but they also might feel more comfortable if they're not the typical person. So especially if you're a DSO, watch out for that because sometimes the students, even like my students in the undergraduate level, they're really nervous to tell you if anything's happened to them, not their fault. They still have a hard time talking to us sometimes because they think for some reason that their visa status is going to be at risk. So it's a good idea to have somebody who's outside of their immigration work and maybe their usual point person. But what else? What other ideas did you come up with?
I said it earlier, just put in another shameless plug for the ACSI addendum. If you're an ACSI school, it absolutely is worthwhile and beneficial for you and your program. To my knowledge, there's nothing else out there that is going to help you make sure that you are doing what you're supposed to be doing and to care for these students and to do what you need to do. So it will definitely affirm you, encourage you to see here's what you're doing so well. And it will give you those steps for improvements and how you can be better. And I appreciate it so much. You're often sitting on an island, and ACSI has recognized that and decided to come alongside of us and help us. Just make sure that we are being accountable and we have standards, and it's not from people who don't know what they're talking about, people that have been caring for international students for years and have watched programs all over the world. So I highly recommend it. You will not regret it. It'll be, for sure, it'll be worthwhile.
Anybody else want to share or any questions about anything?
Well, I just had a thought when you were talking about defining the purpose of the international program as distinct from the school's purpose. And we have had something, but as you were talking, I thought about communicating that out really clearly to everybody who's a part of the international team in certain ways. So our host parents, our homestay, our support staff, even to the teachers who encounter the students so that they understand what we're trying to accomplish. Because I feel like we don't, those of us who work daily in that world, we know this is our mission, this is our purpose. But moving everybody else into that so they understand this is Northland's purpose and this is what we're doing through the international program and here's how you're part of it.
All right. Let me know if you have questions, but otherwise, thank you so much for coming. It's great to have this time with you.
It's a good project.
Yeah, you did a great job.